there's a decent chance this might be the last meeting of the PAC, because it's sometime our goal, our target is for sometime in the first quarter for you to join the members of the TAC and be united as the WAC. So if we make enough progress tonight towards that goal, the thought is that we will take December off, likely January, maybe February, definitely not March. The point of that, and I'll get into in greater detail, is that if we make the progress that we think we might make tonight, that'll be the time when Zach and AE2S, the engineering firm who's doing the evaluations, will kind of be sharpening their pencils and doing their weights and measures and all that sort of thing. So we'll see how far we get this evening. But first, I need to invite any public comment from the group. This is the time to comment on any non-agenda matter falling within the scope of the Integrated Water Resources Planning Committee. There will also be time for public comment in conjunction with each agenda item in which a formal recommendation or decision is being made, but you may only speak once per topic. Please note the committee cannot take action on any item which does not appear on the agenda. All persons addressing the committee shall speak in a civil and courteous manner, and members of the audience shall be respectful of others. Please state your name and place of residence in an audible tone of voice for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. General public comments to the committee can be found on the committee's Laserfish repository page. So if anybody has a challenge finding that, reach out to staff or me. So for the good of the order, is there anybody from the public who'd like to make address the meeting?
I guess I'd like to make a public comment.
Yeah, please.
So should I stand up or?
Yeah, stand up.
Sure. So I'm Adam Sigler, and I live. Do I need to say my address? Is that right?
Whatever you're comfortable with saying. If you're a Bozeman resident.
I'm a Bozeman resident.
Okay.
And I just want to say I really appreciate the this effort this team's undertaking, and wanted to make 3 points. I should have been more tuned in on this than I have been, and I look forward to learning more. But reading a little bit about some of the alternatives, I think 2 things related to irrigation. Critically important to protect current irrigation infrastructure in the valley that plays a critical role in recharging groundwater, and not just for use for managed aquifer recharge for gravel pits and things that have been mentioned, but simply maintaining the current role of groundwater recharge from those irrigation networks. And then the second point related to that is looking at opportunities to connect that irrigation infrastructure with stormwater infrastructure, to think about using potentially retention and detention basins to put water in the ground in between storm events, I think is a creative way to think about things. And then a completely separate topic with water reclamation facility and reuse related, certainly a great option for water sourcing. But in order to do that, I think it's really important to be proactive about emerging contaminants, and to whatever degree it has or has not been done, testing for things specifically like PFAS, and then determining what levels those are in, and then going upstream in the collection facilities to think about where high concentration areas might be and addressing those proactively. A lot of municipalities across the country are doing that. It can be a very effective way to keep the PFAS out of the sludge and the wastewater to make it more feasible to reuse. So just a couple of things I wanted to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for the members of the committee, want to make sure everybody has a mobile device tonight, because one of the things we'll be doing is an exercise where we're asking you to weight certain items, and then we're going to do a real-time reveal of what the committee's, the average committee member thinks of those, get your reactions to that. And in so doing, we're going to compare your ranking of those items to what the TAC delivered earlier today. Get your thoughts on whether you think that feels right, doesn't feel right, if there's outliers. We'll have time to discuss those. And then we also, in as much painstaking detail as you'd like to go through, there are these, as far as we can say, we think this list that was part of your meeting packet is the entire universe of water resource alternatives that are available to the city. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time, as much as you would like, Going over those, we have Zach from A2S is at a conference in Moab right now. The lucky dog gets to go mountain biking on Friday. Maybe the greatest mountain biking place on the planet, next to Bozeman. And then, so he'll be able to give details on these buckets of alternatives and answer any questions. The goal of that exercise is to get a general kind of unofficial head nod from this group that the universe of possibilities is reflected on those 2 pages, and then we're not missing anything big that should be part of the evaluation process. So I think that would give you kind of a little bit of a, oh, here we go, yeah. Whoops, I should have been talking about this, huh? So let's talk about, first start with, everybody get a copy of the minutes in their packet. We're looking for a motion to approve the October minutes.
I move to approve the October PAC meeting minutes as submitted.
Thank you. Any second? Okay. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, those are approved. Thank you very much. Want to talk about screening criteria. Does everybody, I know we're like at a fire station asking you to drink out of a fire hose for a lot of this stuff. So I want to make space for any questions or room for discussion on kind of what the screening criteria are, what the purpose is, and what those individuals, we went through the criteria last meeting, but if there's anybody that over the last month was thinking about it and had a new thought or anything, I want to make space for that. Not hearing any, okay. What the purpose of this slide is to show what we heard from the TAC and the PAC in this group about additions to the screening criteria that are in addition to what was considered for the 2013 IWRP. Okay, so this list of things, there's one technical item added about water rights complexity. There's 2 environmental, watershed resiliency and ecosystem services, along with integrate the value of nature-based solutions. I think we talked quite a bit about that last meeting. On the social side, there were a handful of reads clarifying overall public support, preservation of agricultural heritage, economic resiliency and growth. We added equity, access, and cultural inclusivity. And there's a suggestion to do kind of refine that shared benefit. So these, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, and Zach, who's on the phone, these are all in addition to everything we're carrying forward from the 2013 IWRP, with very just few little modifications. You want to talk a
Pretty
little bit about
much,
that?
yeah. So some of like the sub-criteria titles from 2013 may have changed, but that's because we were trying to like marry things together and integrate them so we didn't have too many more criteria, because there's already a lot. But yes, pretty much that's true. I think the biggest, the added equity, access, cultural inclusivity, and then there was just some changes like from, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna remember what it was called, but it's now called preservation of agricultural heritage. So yeah, these are the highlights for sure of what the changes are.
So I wanted to share with you the weights that the TAC put in front to help with the screening criteria. So within each screening criteria, there are subcategories, and those all got ranked by the TAC. This is an exercise you guys will do here in a few minutes. And then all of those kind of roll up to the big buckets of what really considered. So there was one category was technical screening criteria. The TAC provided an average score of 20 of that. The outliers on the right, we wanted to show kind of what the high and the low was of that process. So one TAC member, one or more TAC members listed technical at 13, lower, and at least one of them listed it as 25. So that's kind of how to read this chart. That tries to present a whole lot of information. Similarly, on the 26 was the weight, average weight from the group on environmental. The outliers were 20 and 35. Social got a score of 18, with outliers on 10 and 25. Economic scored 17, outliers of 12 and 20. And water supply got a 19 with outliers of 15 and 21. So all that to say, here's what it looks like in a pretty graph. So in our discussions in the last meeting, we heard from this group that that you were happy to let the technical advisory committee wallow in technical details, and that you felt comfortable and well positioned to do a ranking exercise on the top line screening area. So that is something we'd love to go through right now. We'll take, I believe there is, we said we'd give you 30 minutes. We'll come together as soon as everybody's completed with it and give it some thought. The idea is if you shoot this QR code and go onto the survey there, the idea is to be able to give numerical values to these areas and think of that as a whole. You have 100 points to assign. Okay, you could assign 95 and 4 ones, or you can spread it out more evenly, whatever you feel like is most important for you for weighting. We would very much encourage you guys to talk through amongst yourselves as you're scoring these, but we'll ask each one of you to submit individual forms for this. And then when we're done, we'll take just a quick break, and my colleague McKenna, who's running the behind the scenes here, is going to build a slide that represents what the PAC's results are, so we'll be able to see them in real time and be able to get your reaction to that.
And you will have a copy of all the criteria in front of you. And we met, me, Zach and I met a couple times between the last meeting and this one to look at all the input from both committees. And we had like detailed checklist of how all of that was addressed. So know that all your comments were addressed. Brooke, I wanted to mention that we explored the idea of having watershed be its own, like watershed considerations being its own main category, and kind of went through an exercise to look at how that would work, and we didn't feel like it did very well, so we fell back to kind of plan A, but just wanted you to know we did look at that. But I say that because if you are going through this and you're wondering how we incorporated some of your feedback, just let me know, ask me questions. Happy to kind of shed some light on that if I can. So. Or if you go through this and you're like, well, I don't really understand these criteria, I can't do this, and we can talk about that too. Yeah. So whatever you want to discuss.
We have plenty of time on the agenda tonight to talk through this, these types of things, so please don't be shy. I feel like the proctor of a test.
Yeah.
Strange feeling.
No, we get some background music.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they'll start talking.
Maybe I can sing.
Put that on my checklist for next time. You want like the Jeopardy theme song?
Yeah, that would.
Please,
question?
yeah.
I think I could look at one of the previous slides. Wasn't it permitting with the water rights, was that in technical? In the previous slides?
Let me go back.
Yeah,
Are you looking for this slide?
yeah, water rights, how is water rights complexity? Yeah, what is that referencing in comparison to like permitting?
So, my understanding of this, and Zach, jump in, you should obviously, Jess, so that there is the revelation on the TAC level that some things that seem possible are automatic, kind of like showstoppers from a water rights perspective.
Yeah.
And so, individuals on the TAC and water rights experts from the city looked at that and said, it would make sense for us to be able to include this so we can identify those things that are kind of non-starters from the beginning and be able to eliminate those and save those resources for closer study of all the other things that remain. Is that fair?
Such water rights complexity?
Yeah.
Got it.
If it's too complex to get the water rights to have it, then we should not consider it.
Okay.
And then for the ones that aren't, which we'll hear more about later, the ones that we have thought with, consulting water right experts that they're non-starters. So once those are filtered out, we'll still have to address the complexity of getting the water right for the ones that you can.
Yeah.
Because we're in closed basins, so it's all difficult, but it's still relative scale within that.
Yeah, got it.
And then Zach, could you talk a little bit about the permitting and environmental, is that the other one you brought up, Grant?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
permitting, permitting and environmental.
Zach, could you give maybe a couple examples of that and like the distinction between that and the water rights piece?
Yes, definitely. Good evening all. Sorry, I can't be there at a floodplain conference in Moab. So yeah, the environmental permitting refers more to Endangered Species Act and Clean Water Act, so wetland permitting, rather than water rights, which is more specific to DNRC water rights permitting.
Got it.
And to probably add on to what Jess and Matt already said, there is an initial screening that we already went through to weed out what's automatically a no-go from a water rights perspective. And like Jess said, just because there's, as you'll see, there's 45 alternatives that have are green lit in terms of water rights, doesn't mean they're all 45 of those have the same level of complexity or challenge to obtain a water right or transfer a water right. So the reason for including it again in the technical is to try to get at that, how challenging will it be, whether or not it's legal has already been filtered.
And I'll note, you guys have probably noticed that the form you're filling out asks you to rank these items in the categories of evaluation criteria. These subcategories, we're not bothering you guys with that level of horrendous detail. So the idea here is to get a sense of, in your view, and your view is to kind of serve as the heart of the process, to think of, what do my friends and neighbors, what is the Bozeman community weight this as? So we are encouraged to think in those terms as you go and assign values to these kind of bigger bucket items.
It's probably time to put Suzanne's now.
Yeah.
So sorry, we should enter when we're ready,
Yeah.
or should we wait?
When you're ready to submit, keep it. You guys are making fast work of this, good job. Okay, I'm pretty sure I can detect McKenna furiously crunching numbers on your fancy spreadsheets and building a chart and dropping it into the slide. So she'll let us know when we're ready. I do feel a little bit like family feud getting to, survey says, that thing. Yeah.
She's like downloaded the slides. She's not gonna be able to drop that to one. Good, go on there, right? It's gonna take a yeah.
We're hosting our utilities management meeting tomorrow, and we are playing Water Jeopardy. They don't know it yet, but.
What's the goal of that exercise?
What's that?
What's the goal of that exercise?
To make it a fun learning experience.
Let's see. Back. To the bottom of the arrow. If you haven't had a chance already, you might make use of the time by just flipping through these, seeing if there's any that you'd like a little more clarification. We got the experts in the room to help discuss those items. And ultimately, the conversation is at some point will turn to, again, is this all the opportunities that are available for the city for its water portfolio? So this will preview of what's coming up next. All right, McKenna says we should be good. So you guys ready to see where your numbers came in? Fingers crossed. Can you cross your fingers? Let me back out. Stop the full screen. Oh, there you go. I think so. Okay, can you confirm that's the right one?
Yes, that's the right one.
Okay, thank you. So, any first kind of from the hip reactions to the results here?
It's like it's all important.
Yeah.
Everything's important.
Yeah.
That's not a big difference from the PAC. Honestly, a little bit different, but not much. Environment was a little bit less, and water supply was 20, like, but within 1 or 2.
Feels like you guys are remarkably aligned. I often view, if it's a Venn diagram, environmental and social are almost in my mind totally overlapping. They're very, very similar. So if you agree with my assessment there, if you took environmental and social and average those, that would be probably pretty equal to the technical level there. Any other surprises or comments on this? This was a huge risk, can I tell you that? Huge risk. Because what happens if you guys are like diametrically opposed to the TAC? Right? Then shotgun wedding to make you into the WAC becomes a little bit more interesting, right? But I think we're fortunate to have two really good committees with reasonable human beings with, you know, good heads on their shoulders who kind of understand their community. So that's why I was really willing to take the risk of doing this live. And I think I'm relieved, but I'm also really grateful that that you guys seem to be pretty aligned with your colleagues on the TAC. So. So the thought now is that these will be a data point for Zach and his group at AE2S, along with the same sort of weighting that was done by TAC. And all the other information that we've been giving them that you guys have been giving direction on or nodding your heads that it makes sense what the TAC came to agree upon. All of that's feeding up into the machine, okay? So we don't need an official motion or anything, but with your blessing, I'd like to recommend that we submit this to AE2S as one of their data points to use as they go about the work of evaluating the universe of alternatives. See heads nodding, I don't hear any loud objections or stomping of feet, so if you guys are comfortable, we can move on to the next part of the agenda. So at this point, the next part again is to go through the alternatives review. So Zach, if you wouldn't mind taking it from here.
Yeah. So you have in front of you a list of 41 alternatives that have been discussed to date. And I'm gonna kind of walk through what has changed or notable changes between the previous IWRP and what we're working with now. And then I'm gonna walk through that water right feasibility stoplight assessment that I was referring to previously. So what changed since the 2013 list? There's a little more focus on nature-based solutions and watershed restoration. There's a whole category of resiliency specific projects. We expanded the non-potable alternatives and reuse alternatives, as well as added stormwater and rainwater capture and reuse. And then finally, we added and maybe refined a little bit aquifer storage and recovery and managed aquifer recharge surrounding groundwater development or groundwater mitigation. So you can go to the next slide unless there's questions on that.
We can always come back.
Okay. So the out of the 40, 41, 40, somewhere between 40 and 50 alternatives that we evaluated, again, this was kind of the city's water rights attorney plus my team, the engineering team. Only two can be cut now based on what we think is just infeasible from a water rights perspective. Those two are Yellowstone River import and Brackett Creek import.
Do you want to just summarize would you mind summarizing kind of the main challenges that drew you guys to this? They might be in parentheses
Yeah.
there,
Depending on who you ask, that's why I was maybe avoiding explaining, because depending on who you ask, Yellowstone River has been fully appropriated. Regardless of whether that's true or not, it would be extremely challenging from a water rights perspective to permit the use of Yellowstone River. There just it isn't an abundant amount of municipal water rights on the Yellowstone, or any, depending on who you ask. And Brackett Creek, similar. It's in a different basin, so it's a challenge to import, and there just isn't a lot of water rights to go around on Brackett Creek. So that's the reason for eliminating these two alternatives at this first level of screening.
So that ends up, well, I'll go on to your next slide, but that ends up being a recommendation from A2S that the TAC and PAC should weigh in on and say, yeah, we agree, or no, we think you should keep considering those types of things.
And those are currently on the list of 41.
Yes.
As is. Yellowstone River import is, Brackett Creek is not specifically called out on there.
Yeah. Got it.
And for context there, Brackett Creek was suggested to be removed by the TAC many meetings ago, so it kind of was more like earlier on removed, and then Yellowstone, that analysis is more recent to identify that as not very viable.
So what is considered yellow or somewhat challenging are these three here, and I'll explain that. But I do want to preface this by saying that just because the remaining 30 whatever are categorized as green does not mean they're a cakewalk to obtaining a water right. It's actually the opposite. It's still going to be challenging because we're in a closed basin, but there's precedent for those 30 some odd, and we think the path to a water right or change of water right application change is slightly more clear and defined than these three. So these three are rainwater and stormwater reuse. To ensure that you're mitigating the reuse of stormwater for downstream users is something that kind of is unprecedented in Montana at this time. Certainly it's common in other states, but it's something that would be a little more challenging than from a legal standpoint than some of the other alternatives. Similarly, a utility interconnect, so connection with Belgrade or some other utility. It's certainly not impossible, but there isn't precedent for it, and there's some complexities and challenges with place of use for water rights, and it's not been done, so it's just a little more unknown. And then finally, naturalized sourdough storage, kind of the same reasons. There's nothing necessarily prohibiting it. It's just there's no precedent for it in terms of establishing a water right for municipal use in Montana. So the path to permitting that from a water rights standpoint is a little more murky and complex.
Does the rainwater and stormwater reuse, does that require some sort of water right?
So that's a great question because it has not been done, it's unknown. It likely would, at the scale that would need to be done, to move the needle for the city's water supply, because it could be argued that it would impact downstream senior water right holders.
So to be clear, Zach, your group is not recommending that these get pulled. You just, through the course of going over it the first time, you just flag these as, not flashing red lights, but potential, the most difficult, more difficult than your average bear.
Correct. And like I said previously, there is another screening level that, in the technical criteria, one of the sub-criterion is kind of the level of complexity, to achieving a water right or change application. And for the next level of screening, which we'll probably get into here in a little bit, but it's going to just be a score of 1 through 3. So if an alternative is the path to a water right or a change application is very clear, and water right professionals see a path to doing that, then it would score a 3. And if it were something like stormwater reuse, it would score a 1. And then we'll roll that up with all the other criteria and sub-criterion that we've discussed last month, and that you guys just helped assign weights to come up with hopefully a shorter list, to go from 45 alternatives to maybe 30, to take to the next level of analysis, which would be a more quantitative analysis looking at life cycle costs, monthly supply yield over a 50-year time span. Is that all making sense? I can't see all your faces, so.
There's lots of enthusiastic nodding. Yeah. So the point of this exercise, like I said, is to just kind of do a gut check and make sure that we didn't miss any that were kind of maybe you came into the process with an idea, thought of like, this would be a really great option to pursue, and I don't see it on this list anymore. I think with this many alternatives that are on the list, it's, I cannot imagine it being not exhaustive, but we wanted to make the space available to have that conversation.
I will say that during our discussion this afternoon with TAC, 4 additional alternatives have been added to the list. Or maybe they were already in here, but they've just been called out as separate specific alternatives. Those being groundwater development outside city limits, shallow groundwater development, water marketing, and salvaged water. So water marketing would be partnering with an entity similar to the Gallatin Water Trust to develop deals, agreements with agricultural water rights holders to basically lease or purchase their water rights. And salvaged water is the concept of providing efficiencies the easiest example is if a farmer is using flood irrigation to convert that to a more efficient irrigation use, and in turn gain the the water that's saved through that efficiency would be converted to a municipal water right for the city, as an example of what salvaged water rights.
So the benefit to the city would be additional water rights. The benefit to the farmer would be the funds that were paid for those. Is that correct in thinking?
Yes.
So this is a big reason why we're glad that we're going to be merging these two groups, is because I'm tired of saying, back earlier today we talked about this, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to getting everybody together in the new year. And Zach, do you want to, I'm not hearing a whole lot of questions or comments about additional alternatives that aren't here, or ones that you're surprised are still on the list, or those types of things. And then we're still open for that conversation. But Zach, I'll put you on the spot and see if you wanted to just riff a little bit about your process from here until the time that the WAC gets together in the new year, and kind of what we expect to be able to share with this group at that point in time.
Sure. So the current process that we're envisioning is for the consulting team, A2S, Jacobs, and WGM group. Those four individuals, so me, Nate Weisenberger, who you have met, Susan Butler, who is with Jacobs and helps communities across the nation and actually internationally as well with integrated water resources plans, and Julie Merritt, who is a water rights specialist with WGM Group. So the four of us would assign, like I was saying, assign a 1, 2, or 3 to each of the sub-criterion for each of the alternatives, which would then roll up to the categories of criteria, and using your weights and the tax weights, basically create a list of a prioritized list of these alternatives. And we would come to our next WAC meeting with that list in order of how they shook out, how they scored, and basically discuss it with you, and if there are red flags or discrepancies that you feel in that prioritized list, we would discuss them, and with the outcome of being, hopefully we have a smaller list of alternatives to proceed with for the quantitative analysis, which again would be life cycle cost for each of the alternatives, as well as monthly yield over a 50-year time period, and combine various portfolios of alternatives together to see what is the best grouping of alternatives to meet the supply gap, the water supply gap projected over the next 50 years. So, but that portion, so after we come back together as the WAC and just look at this initial level 2 screening, which is kind of prioritizing the list, the next steps after that haven't fully been fleshed out yet. So I guess there will still be plenty of time for public input to kind of help guide this process, as well as obviously your input to help guide this process.
So we really had no idea how long it's going to take. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Zach. Go ahead.
Do we want to go through this like we did with the TAC today, since we have time? That might be helpful because there's a lot there.
there is a lot there. Would that be helpful to go into a little bit greater detail on the list? Seeing some head nods. So Zach, would you mind just doing a similar run like you did earlier today? Kind of line by line, and the you know me and acronyms and water concepts, so I might flag you. We'll see.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good. So we grouped things a little differently than previously. Not a ton different though. So the categories, just to assign a quick ID to each, are sourdough, so alternatives that involve storage or the use of the city's storage right in sourdough. WRF is water reclamation facility, so that would be alternatives that involve reusing effluent from the wastewater plant. NP is non-potable, so that would be use of or secondary system for irrigation throughout the city. I is import. GW is groundwater. HY are alternatives that involve highlight reservoir. There's a catch-all for O for other, and then there's just one at the end, or sorry, there's R for resiliency alternatives, and then one at the end for water treatment plant, which is not necessarily going to yield more water supply for the city, but it is a cost that would need to be considered in this analysis when supply to the water treatment plant exceeds 22 MGD. They will need to expand the treatment plant. So going through in a little more detail, there's 3 sourdough storage alternatives. One is traditional impoundment. One is multiple impoundments, low head dams. And the third is that naturalized storage, so something like a beaver dam analog or watershed improvements to reconnect the floodplain. The next grouping is for WRF, water reclamation facility, effluent reuse. Kind of the variations here are dependent on the ultimate use and kind of the how widespread that use is, whether that is targeted locations or citywide or new developments, or groundwater recharge, which would be an alternative to potentially mitigate new groundwater development. Non-potable irrigation, there's 3 here. So a city utility, a citywide utility, targeted retrofit. So kind of what the city's already doing. They're already using non-potable water for irrigating the cemetery and kids sports park. So kind of expansion of that is what NP2 is. NP3 would be irrigation for new development, requiring new developments to install a secondary system for their open spaces or shared spaces in parks. And then NP4 would be requiring new developments to install a secondary irrigation system for everything, for all irrigation. Then there's 2 on the list you're looking at, 2 WR water rights alternatives. But like I said, we're adding 2 more. So water rights acquisition, that would be acquire surface water rights in sourdough and highlight watersheds that can be used at the sourdough water treatment plant. Water rights leasing would be working with individual ag users to lease water rights. Water marketing is the new one that's added. That would be more similar to water rights leasing, but would be working with some entity like the Gallatin Water Trust, and be a little more long-term agreements established through that. Salvaged water, I probably butchered it, but tried to explain what that is. That's, again, water rights realized through efficiencies applied to the use of other water rights. Next three are import, Missouri River, Canyon Ferry, Yellowstone River, which again, we're recommending to remove. And adjacent drainage supply, that's specific to drainages within the Gallatin Basin. Bear Canyon has been discussed, and some other smaller drainages within the basin. Next are groundwater development. So groundwater development within the city limits, which the city is currently working on. Groundwater development with Belgrade. So constructing so Belgrade has a lot more prolific aquifer in their area, so it is a lot easier to get high yield wells. So trying to partner with them to leverage that natural hydrogeology is kind of the concept for that. GW2. GW3 is deep aquifer wells, and then, like I noted, we're adding two more groundwater specific alternatives. One would be similar to GW1, just groundwater development but outside city limits as well. There was talk today of along the Bridger bench, there may be more high yield potential there. And the other new groundwater one would be shallow groundwater use, so which could include non-potable use. The next grouping are the highlight ones. So highlight dam acquisition. I can't remember if that has been discussed in this group or not, but it's not necessarily a supply yielding alternative, but it is something that may lead to more streamlined construction or raising of highlight dam, optimizing of highlight dam, if the city could acquire the dam and operate it themselves.
And I might just
Highlight
chime in and say, sorry, Zach, I might just chime in and say that we added that on here, although it's not really like a hard alternative, because that was recommended from PAC a couple times. We wanted to make sure that we captured that recommendation somehow, so we just added it on here.
Highlight share purchasing, something the city already does and hopes to continue doing. A dam raise, which again, I'll remind you, they did that in the 90s. Highlight reservoir dredging. This is something new that was brought up since 2013. Should be dredging to just preserve the volume in highlight reservoir. Highlight optimization. This is a project that the city will probably be doing in the near term. Adding automated controls to the dam outlet and armoring the outlet tower so that year-long storage could be achieved. Last highlight one is evaluating that conveyance loss. So a 20% conveyance loss is assessed to all shareholders of highlight reservoir water due to conveyance losses. And there's some skepticism over whether those losses are physical or true between the dam and the city's intake.
Yeah.
Zach, sorry, can you explain the winter storage and use? Is it not, you
Yeah,
can't store
so-
most of the winter?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. Currently, the way the dam is operated and is that it's drained every fall, not entirely, but to below 50% or about 50%, due to the concern of ice damage, not only on the embankment itself, but also on that tower that's up there in highlight, which is the primary outlet. So simply, I shouldn't say simply, but potentially armoring um, basically adding rock to or a sacrificial kind of concrete structure around that intake tower, and maybe some more additional armoring along the embankment would would prevent ice damage and allow the dam to remain more full in the winter, allowing the city to potentially use their storage rights throughout the year, as well as fill in the spring more rapidly. Does that
Yeah,
kind
so
of
currently
answer your question?
all the shares.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so currently all the shares, whether it's the city shares or agricultural users, they're only used in the summer because of that, so.
I guess there's probably two of them, I'm just curious.
Nope.
Like, don't dams, they typically drain in the fall, right, 'cause spring runoff?
Not everywhere.
No?
You may draw them down.
Yeah. Cause like you can only hold so much water, doesn't get full pool anyway, so are you gaining anything by that?
I can tell you, and Zach's gonna have a more local example of this, but one of the reasons why, so Denver Water has a facility up in Silverthorne, Dillon area, Colorado, that's called Dillon Reservoir. And that facility, the good people of Silverthorne built their town at the base of that dam. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's an outlet mall down there. And there was a period of time when Denver Water was saying, we will manage this facility in a way that like absolutely minimizes the chance of you guys getting flooded out. And then over the years, Denver Water started backing away from this when I was working there, started backing away from this. They sent me up there to explain this new way of management to the good people of Silverthorne and saying, this is primarily a water storage facility. This is not, we're not operating this for flood control downstream. But to get to your question, if they didn't draw it down and they had a big spring runoff, you could be at full. And if a dam facility is called spilling, which means it's full and it's just going over, you've lost all control for flood control. You can't control how much water is going out at that point in time. So there's risks downstream of that for sure. But the theory of let's draw it down so we have room to fill it up without a whole lot of debris of it spilling over to sitting into the summer is legitimate. So Zach, tell me where I'm wrong. Another example.
So yeah, currently there isn't necessarily a huge need for highlight reservoir water in the winter. As we grow, that will become a more efficient place to get water in the winter. But also on top of that, April, there's a period in April where some of our sourdough water rights actually turn off, and being able to use highlight reservoir water kind of in the early runoff season would benefit the city in the near term. And so providing these infrastructure changes to the dam would not only provide like long-term benefit to the city, but would also provide a easier operations currently.
Cool, thank you.
Let's see, where was I? Oh, for other, so we have valley storage for groundwater mitigation. Sourdough groundwater storage, so that would be use of the city's Mystic Lake right or their municipal reservation on sourdough to do managed aquifer recharge or aquifer storage and recovery down in the valley rather than up in the Mystic Lake area.
Zach, could you
03 is
speak?
valley.
Sorry, Zach, could you speak to and just explain a little bit about what managed aquifer recharge is compared to ASR?
I can do my best. I actually am not an expert in that area, but so managed aquifer recharge would be focused more on recharging the groundwater as a mitigation for extraction somewhere down gradient or downstream or somewhere else, potentially not even connected. And ASR is more, aquifer storage and recovery is more recharging and extraction within the same aquifer and just at various times of the year. So when there is that spring runoff and not all of that water is being used, there's the opportunity to take that and store it in the ground with and then extract it later in the season in August, September when there's a greater demand. That answer you, Jess?
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
The valley storage for water supply. So utilizing natural depression features within the valley to store water and use it. And there's a lot of different versions of that. It could be a private project similar to the solar project that was discussed in the 2013 IWRP. It could be potentially the Gallatin Water Trust does something like this, where they build a reservoir in the valley and sell that water to other users. Ditch improvements, so 05 there is basically making physical changes to the canal to reduce the losses there. 06 and 07 are rainwater and stormwater capture and reuse. 08 is Lyman, so optimizing Lyman. There's some debate on whether Lyman is tapped out in terms of its water rights, use of its water. It's something the city feels is worth continuing to consider in this IWRP.
Can I ask a question?
Please, yeah.
We had the public comment on protect existing irrigation networks. Is that captured in like 05 ditch improvements, make physical changes to existing canals, or is that not captured in these alternatives?
Did you hear the question, Zach? And did you hear the initial public comment on that?
I certainly did, and that's not the first time we've the city's received that comment, and it is absolutely something that we will be taking into account as we weigh the benefits and drawbacks of each of these alternatives. So what that comment is referring to, and the individual can speak for themselves as well, but is that the leaking of ditches and canals provides a benefit to recharging the aquifer, and so yeah, that's kind of what that comment is at, and we fully acknowledge, the city fully acknowledges that there are drawbacks to an alternative that would remove that recharge that's occurring due to that. So if I can be frank, I don't think that alternative will rise to the top.
The alternative of armoring the canals or the
Of ditch
ditches.
improvements, correct.
Okay,
05 is referring to putting cement in ditches?
It could be lining canals, yeah, in some way, right? That could be done in various ways, but it's essentially reducing the losses from whatever word you want to, or leakage, right? Of that surface water moving into the groundwater, which provides a big benefit to groundwater recharge.
So 05 is in opposition to.
Okay,
For a minute, I thought I got that one. Okay, thank you.
yeah, it sounds like sounds like that concept might be on the chopping block for the reasons that there's an amazing beneficial effect of recharging groundwater with that source. So I'll let you continue, Zach.
Okay. Moving on to the R's for resiliency. Cloud seeding, drought reserve, establishing a drought reserve with
There's a
existing
question
supply.
Question on that, Zach.
I don't know much about cloud seeding. Is there any drawbacks environmentally to cloud seeding?
I don't
Good
think
question.
that's well. I don't think that's well understood, to be honest with you. It is certainly practiced in the U.S. and internationally. Utah, where I am right now, does it all the time. I don't know if Colorado does it. Places in the Middle East do it. Whether, yeah, we acknowledge that that there's a big can of worms, hairy can of worms, or something like that, and it would have to be done at the state level. But for the sake of having a complete list of alternatives, it's on the list right now. And again, if I'm being frank, I don't think it'll rise to the top.
Thanks.
Utility interconnect, that would be, again, not necessarily providing a new supply to the city, but for emergency use or during a drought, partnering with Belgrade or another utility in the valley. Watershed restoration to improve yield. This is projects like connecting the river to the floodplain again to kind of make the watershed spongier and improve yield. There have been studies to show that actually can be a productive way to improve yield. The problem is that it's difficult to quantify and it's difficult to permit from a water rights standpoint. And the R5 there is snow fencing or mounding. This would be either passive or active strategies to collect deeper areas of snow so that the melting of that snow is prolonged to provide greater yield during runoff. And then the final one there, so like I said, the water treatment plant expansion would be required after 22 MGD at the plant, million gallons per day.
And for context on that, in the winter, I mean, it fluctuates, but we're using about 5 million gallons a day. And no one's irrigating. In the summer, I think we've hit, this isn't typical, but like at a really hot peak day in a dry year, like 15 MGD. But that hovers more around like 12 in a typical peak season. So just for context on that. And I might just also add, going back to R2, the drought reserve, that is something, I don't remember if we've talked about it before, but that is something that was a recommendation out of the city's first drought management plan. And I call it out because it actually almost does the opposite of most of these. It would actually kind of take water out of the accounting for future needs. It would basically earmark water in some way to hold in reserve for emergency use likely related to a severe drought event. So definitely a resiliency project, but not one that would also kind of build up, right, our supply to meet future needs. And just for the record, you know, I know that you said this going through this list, but I just want to reiterate that this list is everything that we could possibly do if we want. It's not like the list of things we're going to do at all at this point. It, you know, it really came from a compilation of 2013 alternatives, suggestions from this group and the TAC, as well as some, you know, ideas the city has had. So I just wanted to say that, maybe for the record, honestly, just so that there's context around all of this stuff. It's really just a starting point, everything under the sun, so.
How does you mentioned salvaged water being an addition to this sheet. How does that fit into one of the categories? I feel like the other three that you mentioned fit into other categories. I don't know what salvage means necessarily. Water.
I can take a run at it.
Go ahead.
So, I'm a farmer, okay? I practice flood irrigation on my fields.
Okay.
My family's been doing this for years. I go to a conference or convention and I run into people who are experts in different forms of irrigation. And they say, I can come to your farm and end up saving you money by helping you use less water to get the same yield out of your crops or your whatever business you're in. So if I'm not using that as much water, let's say that they say, I can put irrigation on your property and it's going to, if you're using 100 units, you're only going to need to use 70, okay? And you're going to get the same yield and everything. So that leaves that 30% as potentially, and I don't know, I'm no expert in Montana water law, but potentially that could be leased, sold, transferred somehow to a municipal entity who would pay in that exchange, so that the benefit of the city would be they have this new reliable water source. The benefit to the farmer is they have a new income stream to supplement their work. How many places did I get that wrong, Zach?
No, that's good. And yeah, the water savings through that activity would still need to go through a water right change application to, like Matt said, transfer it to municipal use and a different place of use. I will add to that too that my understanding is that much of the irrigation in the area has already been converted to efficient uses. So I don't, again, we still need to kind of do some of the analysis here, but I don't think that alternative will rise to the top because I don't think there's a lot of water to squeeze out of that one.
Yeah, and Suzanne, I think your question was a little bit related to like where would we stick that in here on this list, and there was some conversation this afternoon about how that could tie into this concept of ditch improvements, where if, right, we were to line canals and see some savings because that water isn't moving into the ground, then that could be this salvage concept too, the same idea of like efficiency. Again, as Zach mentioned, there's a lot of considerations with lining canals, and so that may not be something we pursue. But that's an example of like, you can almost look at 08 and say, or excuse me, 05 and say ditch improvements or salvage. That would be kind of, that's one way we talked about it this afternoon, so.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, you know, I'm glad that we know that I'm not a water expert in this room. So this may be a dumb question. We have in spring more rain on snow events, and so it melts really fast. And
Yeah.
do any of these alternatives help address keeping some of that water when we have that happen? I'm just curious if any of these would be helpful in that.
Yeah, I think all of the storage alternatives would, and then as well as the aquifer storage and recovery, and as well as the valley storage. So where that water would be supplied from for valley storage, the low-hanging fruit is what you're talking about, is kind of capturing those peak flow events that when the water isn't being quote unquote air quotes here used by anyone else, it would be to capture and store that for later use. So yes, I would say yes. I think that kind of concept is captured in many of these alternatives.
Thank you.
She didn't see your question, did she, Mary?
No, I got a couple other ones.
Okay.
Let me think. I think there's a ton of ideas on here. Sure, the last thing you guys need are more ideas, but like,
No, that's what we're here for. Yeah.
obviously we're not the first city to deal with these kind of headaches. I'm sure you guys have studied other cities as far as what other cities have done elsewhere and what's been successful.
That's the Zach show. And I think
Yeah, I mean,
the person that you introduced us to last time, Barbara? Susan?
Yeah.
So Susan and Barbara were sisters who grew up cattywampus behind me, and I always get them mixed. So if you forgive me, but Zach, tell us about your experts that you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So yeah, Susan has worked on these across the nation and internationally. To answer your question directly, I mean, what most cities do is storage. So when you're in the headwaters of a watershed, and you're reliant on snowpack, and that snowpack is vulnerable to climate change and just natural seasonal fluctuations, storage, surface water storage, or ASR, aquifer storage and recovery, are what most cities look to first.
Got it.
And I think we have those well captured here. Yeah.
The state of Montana also really is trying to prioritize more storage across the state for water users, so.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, right? Because if we can focus on projects that the state supports, there might be funding and things like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just my second question is back to kind of these guys' point. I know there's the benefits of the groundwater recharge. I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me too, what are all the benefits of groundwater recharge?
Zach?
Well, so a lot of people rely on groundwater down gradient of Bozeman, and down gradient of those recharge zones. So it's kind of similar to, maybe you could think of it as like capturing and reusing stormwater, may have a negative impact on downstream water rights holders. This is kind of this similar concept. Removing that recharge path may have an impact on downstream water rights holders. And then, of course, there's the whole environmental consideration too. That recharge provides habitat for wetlands across the valley, and other, aquatic features. And so there's that drawback as well.
Got it.
There's a lot of ideas. Now the point is to see which ones are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones. Cast the bad ones aside with your oversight and approval at a later date, and then spend some time on what the ones that have promise, quantify the value of those, dollar per acre foot, or how much yield you're going to get on a 12-month basis, what Zach was saying, and ultimately we just keep refining until there's a, like we call it, a portfolio of these that you as the WAC agree will meet the needs of the city for the next 50 years. At that point, the plan is that the update becomes a document that has all the study and background information from Zach and his team. We would then come back to the WAC and say, here's a summary of the document of all the things we've talked about and all the things that we've agreed on, and here's the changes that we adjusted based on the feedback that we heard in the prior meeting, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, we're hopeful that we would get consensus from the WAC in that these are the best ideas, and a recommendation to the commission that it adopt the IWRP update as its new integrated water resource plan. Along the way, we're not forgetting about people outside this room too. So we're planning to do outreach events in the form of open houses, where we can bring these ideas out into the community and say, here's the list of what we're evaluating, kind of similar conversation that we're having now with you guys. Here's what we heard from the PAC, here's what we heard from the TAC, what say you? Bring that feedback back to this group, the WAC really, say here's what we're hearing at the open house, here's what we're hearing on Engage Bozeman when we were doing some polls and some surveys in the community there. So all this information comes in here for consideration and deliberation. And ultimately that's down the road, I don't know. We talked a lot today about the process and the timeline, and frankly, that we need to be nimble and flexible on the timeline of this, because as the situation changes, we want to make sure that we're reacting favorably and taking into proper consideration. So there's absolutely no rigidity on the city staff or the city's part on this is going to be done in this order in this timeline. So that's why it's a little bit nebulous when we talk about, when we want to ideally go to commission with a recommendation, because we need all these things to kind of marinate a little bit and let proper deliberation and study be done, and then have enough time to react to comments and feedback from all the groups we talked about to feed into that. So kind of a little bit loosey-goosey, but it's kind of the nature of these projects. So if you guys are in the head nodding mode to say, yeah, I feel like this is a darn complete list, and you have confidence that the initial screening process is going to be successful in kind of winnowing down those that we kind of feel like maybe non-starters. I think that the next step would be to take a short hiatus, so December, January, and reconvene as a WAC early next year. There's also talk of a day of tours.
Yeah, so we're doing that.
Yeah, talk about that.
So we had a request from a TAC member to have tours of our treatment plant, both sides, the water treatment and then wastewater side. So we're thinking about making some options for tours after the new year, since holidays are upon us and everyone's busy. So I will figure out a way to try to send out like time options for folks if you want to do either or both of those. You can also meet your counterparts that are on the other side of things you haven't met yet. So we're hoping to do that after the new year. And while I'm thinking of it, since we're talking about shifting into the WAC, currently you all meet in the evening and they meet during the day, and so we'll have to try to find some time that works for everyone. We did ask them earlier how flexible they'd be to meet in the evening, and it sounded like they would be, but I wanted to ask on the same side how flexible you all would be to meet during the day. I understand it's a little bit different for them being on this as part of their job, right? So it's a little bit different for you all, so no pressure, but just wanted to see what the flexibility could be for that.
We can still be on Wednesdays.
It could be, or it could change. I think we're gonna have to, I think, start over on like days. The third Wednesday worked for this, but we might have to revisit that going forward. So. Okay. No, that's good to know.
We need to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's on my calendar, I can make it work.
Okay,
Yeah, with enough heads up.
okay.
I teach classes on particular days and have.
Yes.
I can share a schedule.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, no, that makes sense. Well, we'll find something that works for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no final closing comments, questions, suggestions, complaints, I want to thank the members of the community for coming out, being here as observers and making comments. Thank you very much for that.
Is there an opportunity to make another public comment? I think it said on each piece of the agenda. Did I get that right or not?
Typically for public meetings, this one's a little different because there aren't a lot of like formal decisions being made. So the way that we're doing it for this is public comment for each agenda item in which a recommendation is made, like a more formal than just discussion.
Where we have a motion and then a second and that sort of thing. But do you mind? We could ask.
Fine, if you'd like to make another public comment, please do.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna say that, so Adam Sigler, I live in Bozeman. Peak water demand is July, August, and peak water availability is May, June. As climate change happens and runoff moves earlier, the separation between those becomes bigger, and it becomes more important than ever to store water in the ground where it's away from evaporative loss. And groundwater recharge is the way that we do that. And irrigation infrastructure is an incredible way to move water across the landscape and recharge groundwater that we already have, and it's that resource is under threat with development and it's going away. So there's a lot of opportunities right now to preserve that capacity if we act on it. And I think that especially with, I heard the number 15 million gallons per day peaking and more around 12 with the limit of 20. That suggests to me that the reclamation opportunities or the shallow groundwater use for irrigation could be a way to put off the need to enhance treatment capacity for the sourdough plant. And so putting water in the ground around the valley could facilitate that shallow groundwater use for irrigation that wouldn't have to be treated up to drinking water standards, which would also be cost effective. So I think that I really appreciate all the effort that's going into this, and I'm looking forward to engaging more thoughtfully in this because it's really interesting to hear about. And I think that the salvage opportunity, it's already been cautioned against, but when you increase the efficiency of irrigation, you basically decrease what's going in the ground and you increase what's going in the air. And so it doesn't put more water into the watershed. It could be a mitigation opportunity for the city, but as far as the system in general, it's going to decrease the amount of water availability. So I think that was already said, and it doesn't seem like it'll rise to the top, but yeah, thoughtful discussions and other things I want to say I'll follow up on later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
No, okay. Well, without objection, I think we're adjourned. So thank you for your time, Grab, food to feed the family and your 6 closest neighbors on your way. And thank you. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll be in touch about when we're feeling like we're in a position to get back together and do a tour, meet up with the TAC, become one, and then get together as one big happy family. So thank you all.